Hello, wild ones. It's Cyprus. On this installment of Greek Goddess Tour, we arrive on Crete.
So look at the frescoes that are still.
Now, this stop was particularly special to me because, well, a lot of things. Okay, how am I going to unpack all of this? We're going to handle this particular episode a little differently because I'm really going to be talking a lot about myself and my experience on Knossos. Boy, where do we even start? The visit to Crete and to Knossos begins the night before I was having, I'm not going to say a bad dream, but I was having a dream about my father, and I haven't had to deal with one of those in years. In this dream, I was screaming at him, screaming in his face, and slapped him in the face, and I was saying, "This ends now." And I was referring, of course, to his particular problems with being abusive. The dream bothered me because I've been done with this for years. I did the work. I had my confrontation dream with him years ago, and it was a whole lot more intense than slapping him in the face. We'll leave it at that. I've still got some things in my life I need to work on, but as far as dealing with an abusive upbringing, I have done that. I have sifted through the wreckage. I have processed. I have pulled up and dug out every demon I can find. This is something that I am confident in saying I've done the work. And so I was very confused that morning as to why I was having this dream that seemed like a call to process the abuse. We had been traveling across the sea through the night, and we arrived at the docks 7-ish that morning.
Good morning.
Oh, good morning! How are you?
And as it was, I was supposed to meet the group at 6:30 for breakfast, and I didn't make it until 7. So I don't remember if I even got breakfast that morning, because then we had to disembark at 7:30. So I would have had at most a bite. We took taxis toward the ancient site at Knossos. As we arrived, we were there probably 15 minutes before the park opens.
Good morning. We are on the island of Crete. It was another breakneck before dawn morning, but we made it. We are in a waiting area. It's shady, actually, for the palace, or the temple, and just waiting for things to open.
I was already feeling a little weirdly deja vu-ish. I was noticing that the forests on Crete are very similar in composition and feel to the forests of Upper Michigan, where I spent vacations as a child. It's always been a place of special, a place where you reconnect with the divine on the shores of Lake Superior in Upper Michigan. And so the fact that entering Crete felt very much like being in Michigan's UP already gave it this sense of the mysterious and access to something sacred.
The peacock? They're peacocks, yeah.
Yeah, I've been hearing them.
Peacocks always is the presence of the goddess.
So as the gates open and they let all the tourists in, most of the tourists went directly for the main, let's call it a courtyard. There's a big flat place on the top of what would have been one of the floors of the temple. They call it a palace. That's where everybody headed first, and our group took a little side tour around over the west side, I believe it was, so that we could feel the space and absorb it and not be conflicted by all the people energy. We sat in the space for a while. We tried to absorb the place and get a feel for things. We talked about the history of the place. The culture of Minoan Crete differs so much from the known ancient world.
Here, so you're right. It's a very different energy from everything else, from everything that we know.
Then we ventured through the ruins. We checked out everything that wasn't roped off and left a little water offering as we do, and finally made our way up onto that courtyard. That courtyard has access to what they call the throne room. There's a famous throne that was found in situ there. It's, of course, roped off. You can't get in there and actually sit in the ancient throne, but you can see it. They've sort of remastered, repainted the murals from what was left behind. They've sort of reconstructed that room to the best of their ability. After seeing that really important throne room adjacent to the courtyard, we made our way back out and over onto the east side of the courtyard. We found a little less crowded place to sit on the rocks and do a group meditation. Now, we had been advised that this meditation would be important as far as grounding. It was suggested that we might want to wear really flowy skirts with nothing underneath, so that when we sit on the rocks, we could literally sit directly on the rocks and connect without the barrier of clothing to the actual physical space of Knossos. And I did that. I know at least one other member of the party did that. I don't know who all did it and who didn't. I'm not gonna call anybody out. That could get a little weird. But if I'm gonna travel halfway across the world and get a meditation in a sacred ancient space, and it's suggested to me there's a way to more fully embrace this experience, I'm gonna do it. So that's what happened.
Anyway, so the way it was done happens in all the two mysteries that we have, because we have two mysteries. We have the Caveria mysteries and the Elefsina. So you get lost in the labyrinth, as you all know, which is our own self. Labyrinth is our own self, if we kind of think what labyrinth means, correct? We get lost in our own stuff all the time. It's kind of like you find your beginning of your core and how to come back to your core. So just remember where your core is. Your core is beauty, light, love, correct? That's where our core is.
As we sat down and grounded and began this meditation, I was focused on that dream that I'd had last night, because the timing of it had to come up for a reason, and I was trying to figure out what the dream meant, because, again, still really sure I'd taken care of my own personal work in that area. And as we connected with Source, I understood that I have a particular role to play in healing the family line. I realized during this meditation that it is because I've done the work, because I've been able to do that processing, that I'm in a position to send that healing back out and back through the lines for generations. Now, this is not something that had ever occurred to me before this moment. It really sort of one of those, what? That's a thing? It's sort of like if you take snake venom, there's something you can do to it to turn it into the antidote for snake venom, and that somehow that is what I've been doing in doing the healing work with all of this genetic inheritance and lived experience inheritance of abuse, and doing that work and processing it. I have somehow, through my healing, created that anti-venom inside of me in a sort of spiritual or energetic way. And there's apparently a way to then take that and implant it in those in the same family who have been wounded and still need healing. And this is new to me. This is still not something I have any idea how this is supposed to happen, but what? So I'm sitting there and just this information, this knowledge is just sort of filling up my brain, and I'm like, oh, it started making sense. And as I started seeing my role in that way, it was like my awareness took this huge step back. I wasn't the me of this life anymore. I was me. Like I was actually thinking and perceiving as my real self. The self that we forget when we come here because we wouldn't be able to tolerate staying here if we could remember. And I was in that mental space of my real self and looking at my life as one piece of this huge project. That my life wasn't an individual life, that it was this arc of lives that spanned millennia. It was this big involved project. These lives that I have lived and that I am living are connected in that they're all part of this one big project. And it was like, oh, no wonder I'm so fucking tired. So that happened. I don't even remember what I told the group when we shared after the meditation. I think I said something about cleansing familial karma, worrying about my nieces and nephews and not wanting my nieces to grow up with this legacy of abuse and not wanting my nephews to grow up and perpetuate it. But there was so much more to it. Just, there was no way to talk. It was still too new and I'm still like reeling what the heck just happened. So on cue, one of the docents got really agitated at the fact that we had a camera running and snapped at us. The staff of the archaeological sites in Greece are very concerned that people are going to use these archaeological sites as sacred sites, and they're not okay with it. It makes them very uncomfortable. And sure enough, she was like, "What are you doing?" And so I grabbed the camera and set it beside me and didn't actually turn it off, but it looked like it was off. I kept rolling, but from a different vantage point. So we had a little bit of time to wander after that, which was a good thing because I was kind of spacey after getting that much data running through me and being so aware for a moment. And one of the things that had been happening and continued to happen as we roamed the space was I kept getting vivid technicolor images and sensations of life in this space. I saw the crowds gathering on the hills. I saw priestesses making ritualized offerings in the throne room. I saw acolytes bringing offerings up to the dais in very ritualized movements. I understood the mood and I felt all the things. It was just patches, but they were so vivid. It was really intense. The footage that I got on Crete wasn't great because I was having trouble focusing because I kept experiencing these sort of wormholes back into life there. The place is still reeking with the life that went on there for a very long time. I think part of that is because it was preserved for so long. It's only been in the last, 100 years, 70 years that it was dug up. I forget when. When did Evans discover that there was a city or a temple buried there? I can't remember. But it was preserved under dirt for so long. Only fairly recently it's been excavated, so the energy signatures of people are still really strong, despite the hundreds of thousands of tourists that run through there every year, I'm sure. So I've never been so affected by a physical space like that. I tend to be sensitive to the energy that a place holds, but this was on a completely different level. probably looked a little drunk or something because I was sort of half in and half out of keeping track of what was going on in the group. So Knossos and the ruins there were profound for me. It changed my perception of my life because it gave me back my perception of self. I can still hold on to that memory of me, of my real me. And the real me is a lot less damaged than the me that I'm dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And that memory is something I can draw on, reboot myself, recenter myself when I'm getting really anxious or overwhelmed by how people just don't make any sense. It doesn't always work. Especially if I feel particularly violated by people crossing my boundaries, but it's there and I can access it. It's given me the perspective that I needed to function in this world. So Crete was really trippy for me. And I know I'm not the only one. I know a lot of the group were affected by the energy of the space. It was very, very clearly a sacred space and still is. And of course, we had to be back to the cruise ship before we were really done. We were only there for about, a couple of hours maybe? It was so not enough. We didn't even make it into the museum. I'm gonna have to go back. There's just no question about it. It happened so fast. It's like we blinked and it was over. But wow, I think that was the most intense experience. And I had a lot of intense experiences throughout this trip, but Knossos was just the epicenter of what the heck for me. So that happened. So our morning on Crete was very intense from a spiritual and mindfulness perspective. Then our afternoon on Santorini was much more relaxed and laid back. And you'll hear about that in the next installment. So stay tuned because I got some amazing footage of Santorini. I hope you've enjoyed the footage. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about my experience. Thank you for watching. Keep track of our journey by subscribing, clicking the notification bell. Don't be afraid to like, comment, and share. And you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram in between videos. I'd like to thank my fellow travelers for making this series possible and for Woman-Arising for organizing this trip. If you'd like to know more about sacred journeys and Woman-Arising, I will include links below in the description box. In the meantime, keep your travels wild. I'll see you in the next video.